being said, it is 10:02 my time, so I think it is time to get started. Welcome to the Beginner's Guide to Reporting. This is one of the live on ServiceNow webinars. Today is July, or excuse me, that's a typo. It is June 26th, nearly July. And my name is Laura McManaman. I am the Senior Developer Advocate that'll be walking you through today's content. As always, we've got to include the Safe Harbor notice. Albeit today we will not be covering any forward-looking software. We always encourage people to make purchasing decisions based off of what is currently available. So if I happen to answer any questions based off reporting features in Xanadu, Yokohama, or beyond, please do not make purchasing decisions based off of that information. Now, as I said, today is a live on ServiceNow webinar. If this is your first, welcome. We're very excited to have you here. And this is actually part of an entire series. It's a curated series here to connect you with ServiceNow experts and peers to help you deploy products and achieve value faster. If you like today, we hope to have you join us again for another webinar, scanning the QR code on the screen now. I'll give you a second to pull out your phones. We'll bring up the entire schedule. There is tons of great content on a huge variety of topics. So I highly encourage you to give that a look-see today, especially if you find value in today's session. Couple of housekeeping notes. The early birds got a little bit of this, but I will say this again. This is an interactive session. I might be the only one talking, but that does not mean I cannot see your questions. We are saving some time at the end for Q&A. However, if I see something appropriate, I will also be answering it intermittently. Your ticket to asking any type of questions that might pop up is using the Q&A button on Zoom. If you're looking at that Zoom toolbar that says participants, chat, all those types of Zoom tasks, it might be hidden by default. If it is, go ahead and click the More button. It's the circle with the ellipses, and that might show the Q&A window. I will be here to answer the technical questions. If you're having any problems with the webinar itself, we have a whole team behind the scenes that's also working to get those addressed. If you are having to leave early or you're just kind of taking a lunch break and something pops up, the presentation will be recorded and it will also be shared on the ServiceNow community website. So do not fret if you must leave early or if you've joined late and missed a big portion of this. After the event, we will be prompted to fill out a survey. Surveys mean a lot to ServiceNow. I've seen even products that ServiceNow releases come as a result of customer surveys, and this webinar is no different. Your feedback means the world to me, to the entire live on ServiceNow team, and it helps us create a schedule that best suits your needs. So please fill out the survey, and that would help us tremendously. And thank you for joining us today. My name is Laura McManaman. I am one of ServiceNow's 4 developer advocates, so you might see some familiar faces on the screen here. I work alongside Chuck Tomasi, Earl Duque, and Pranav Bhagat, and we work on a lot of content that is here for developers. We are here to enable them, to uplift them, and to advocate them in the best way that we can. And we do that in a variety of ways. We kind of help run the programs such as the Developer MVP program. We help out with the Dev Meetup program. Content-wise, we run the developer YouTube channel. We put out a lot of information when it comes to new releases. So you might see some Tech Now webinars come up that are very, very close to coming out for the Xanadu release. And then, of course, we participate in CreatorCon. So if I'm a familiar face, you might have seen me at a lot of our CreatorCon content at Knowledge 24 and in the past. I obviously work for ServiceNow. I've had the pleasure of working for ServiceNow these past 7 years. So it's my 2nd year on the team as a developer advocate and my 7th at the company. And I'm very, very, very happy to have that be part of my career. Now, no more burying the lead. Let's dive straight into reporting. Now, I think the important thing is now that everyone in this webinar is here to talk about reporting on ServiceNow, I think we need to start off on the same page. What is reporting? There's lots of definitions. I happen to like this one. Comes from the very well-known source of easyllama.com. So shout out to easyllama.com. It states that reporting is the process of providing information to a specific audience, usually in a structured format. There are a lot of definitions of reporting. I personally like this one because, frankly, it gives us 3 goals for today. It says we need to find A, the right information, B, choose the intended audience that that specific report is for, and C, orient the data in a format that is best suited to answering the question, because that's ultimately why we are running a report. Someone has asked us a question about all the work that we are doing or a team is doing or the output of some sort of organization. And it's those 3 points that will help us create the best type of report. Now, the kind of the flow of today's presentation is that I'm going to go through the instructions in this PowerPoint of how to create a report. After this, I will also be demoing live how to do so. So we'll kind of do a tutorial and then we'll do a live demonstration. Again, if you have any questions, pop them in the Q&A. If I find them relevant for the moment, I will answer them in the moment as well. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, now that we've defined reporting, the next logical question is, where does reporting exist on the ServiceNow platform? ServiceNow platform is big. So luckily, if you've been granted the right to create reports on your instance, you really just need to search for the words report in the application navigator. The application navigator is part of that toolbar at the top of every ServiceNow window, and you can access it by clicking the All button. After that, you simply need to search for the word reports, and everything under the header reports pertains to ServiceNow's reporting application. And there's actually quite a bit to that application. It's not just the reports themselves. For example, if you click on Getting Started, it'll actually take you directly to the reporting documentation. This is something that the last couple of releases of ServiceNow have done very well, is integrating tutorials and integrating product documentation directly into the apps themselves. The second one on this list will say View and Run. This takes you to all the reports that you personally have access to. And then finally, you can see something that says Create New. That takes us to the report designer. So if your goal was, I want to learn today how to create reports, that Create New under reports is going to be your ticket. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, there's a lot more under that list. That is true. Obviously, today is the beginner presentation, so I won't wax poetic too much about those other things, but just know that a lot of them pertain to the administration of reporting. So as a normal employee, you probably aren't automatically assigned an admin role for reporting. But if you are, just know that a lot of those other things pertain to the administration of the reporting application. Now, I did kind of hint at this earlier. You might be following along and saying, all right, let's see if I can build a report on my company instance. But as you've typed in report, maybe things don't look the same. You might be thinking, this does not look like my instance. And that could be for a variety of things. One might be that you're running a different version of ServiceNow. I'm currently, all these screenshots are taking in the latest Washington release. But most likely, this has to do with a security issue. Now, like all things in ServiceNow, reporting has its own set of roles that you as a user must have access to do specific things with it. This is the same if you're using ITSM, HR, CSM. You aren't really a person as ServiceNow is concerned. You as a user are a collection of roles, and the platform interprets what you can do based off those roles. So at minimum, you need to have that report _ user role. So if you're on your company instance, you're not seeing report maybe pop up in the application navigator, or things aren't looking right, you might be missing that role. I would encourage you to reach out to your ServiceNow administrator or that team to properly procure that role for you. There's also a couple of other roles here. These are all the roles pertaining to reporting. You can get a copy of this deck after the presentation is over. So this is more of like a reference guide versus a slide that you should be reading through. But just know that there's a collection of them. As I hinted at before on the previous slide, that report admin role would be the one that got you the whole shebang. Now, building reports in ServiceNow is done so in a codeless fashion, and it's really broken down into a 4-step process. So after clicking on that reports create new, it takes you to the report designer. It is in this first step that we will learn how to achieve that first goal that we talked about earlier, which is how do we report on the right information? On the left, ServiceNow asks us three things. It asks us for to give a name. So the first task is to give your report a meaningful name, something that people can look up and know explicitly what it's talking about. But then it starts to kind of get a little tricky, right? It says, after giving our report a name, it asks for a source type where there are two options. There's two options for everybody: data sources and tables. Everything on ServiceNow is stored within its own table. Think of a table as a spreadsheet, right? From incidents to changes to requests or even custom entities that you as a customer might have created, everything is stored within its own table. As reporting beginners, it's probably best to report off of specific tables as the source for our reports to draw that information from. So kind of paralleling that example to the Excel metaphor, that would be like running a report off of that specific sheet, right? Now, what are data sources? As I said, like pick tables, not data sources. Data sources technically are the best practice for reporting. Why is that? Data sources require some configuration ahead of time. So they are not as easy just to kind of jump in and run in. However, they allow you to pre-filter and configure information from tables to create faster, better reports. So instead of reporting off of the entirety of every incident that ever existed, that maybe some of which you don't have access to, data sources allow you to gain access to specific things and also pre-filter it. So you're not having to run your report off of 5 million records every time, maybe only 5,000. So that's why it's the default. That's why it's the best practice. But as beginners, and honestly, it's much more a common use case to run them off tables. Half the time I create reports is because someone asks me in the moment, hey, can you, what's that thing? What's how many of X have been in Y? And I just run a report very quickly. That's a much more common use case for reports, I would argue, versus building something to be a permanent fixture of like a dashboard or something. But getting a little bit ahead of myself there. So after we've picked the source type of table, we then can pick our specific table. So maybe you want to run a report off of the incident table. Maybe you want to report off of the change table. I will say in this list, you will see tables again that you have access to. That will be a constant theme kind of in everything you do on ServiceNow, right? You are permitted to the things that your roles allow you to have access to. So again, if you're trying to run a report and you're like, I'm not seeing the table, it's most likely a security issue that you could take up with your admin. Now, before I get too far ahead of myself, data sources aren't the only way to limit the data being reported on. For example, in the designer view, under the table we selected, there's a little funnel icon. If I can circle it here, it's that little like triangle with a tube after it. That is the universal sign on ServiceNow for filtering. And we can use that to limit the records being reported on within our table. It runs that query every time, which is why it's slightly a slower method than using data sources. However, for a lot of things, it works just the same. So for example, for this one, I chose the incident table to report on, but maybe I don't care about every incident. I've only worked here a year. So maybe I just want last year's incident. So I can build that query very similarly to how you build queries when you're looking at lists or things like that. So in this case, I said when the created date was on last year, and that filtered my list significantly. So I could build those queries. You can use and or statements to make them very complex. You can dot walk to even other information in other tables. So filtering from the circumstances that I've built reports, filtering has more than compensated for my lack of use of data sources. So you can meet yourself kind of halfway with those. Now, the next screen allows us to kind of shuffle things around a bit and focus on our third goal, which is how do we orient the data in the right format? It is here on this screen that you will learn how to, that you've actually been dealing with ServiceNow reports your entire time on the platform, because the most common form of reports is the list. In fact, when you move to the type field, it'll run your currently selected data set and just create a list for you. So spoiler alert, you actually have been using reports for a long time on ServiceNow. However, that is just the tip of the reporting iceberg. There are a tremendous amount of formats to explore. Each type is called a visualization type, and they're kind of categorized in a variety of ways. There are 4 types of bar charts, and those are used to compare individual or aggregate scores across data dimensions. So, grouping things by category, grouping things by assignment group. There are 3 types of what are called pies and donuts. So those are nice to show proportions. You can see like, 50% of the tickets were closed on time, or it's kind of more of like the gauge visual. There are 5 types of time series charts to visualize data over time. How many incidents were closed per month over the last calendar year? How many P1 things happened every single day? You can get very specific on it. There are 3 multidimensional reports. So those are like the pivot table equivalent. 3 scores. And if none of those work, you've also got what are just kind of called other. And those are a collection of very wild visualizations that I actually use pretty frequently. There's the calendar, there is the map. So you could create like a physical geographic map of things, and a whole lot more. So they're very fun to explore with. And this is where we start picking what is the visualization that best answers our question. We already have the data set, we have the data. Now we need to decide how we orient it to answer the question that we are being asked. But picking the visualization is only half of it, right? Because you pick a visualization, you still have to configure what that visualization is basing things off of. And that's the next step, the configuration step. Now, if you report on a list, for example, you must choose what columns to show. What field determines the order of things? Maybe that list is grouped by certain entities. If I were to report on a time series, what date determines the time series being shown? Also, what like specificity of date matters to our question. Do we want to see things on a month-by-month basis, a yearly basis, a weekly basis? These questions are all answered on the 3rd screen of Report Designer, which says Configure. For example, in this screenshot, I selected the standard bar chart, and then based off that, I could choose what field determined the bar, if it is stacked to show other values, how the data is aggregated, and even the max number of groups to show. And this configuration screen will look different for every single visualization. So it's a little hard to show in the moment what you can expect there, but that's where you really tweak this thing into an orientation that best suits your needs. Now, this isn't one of the 3 initial questions that we answered or asked for before, but I'd be remiss not to talk about the styling of reports as well. As you can see in that visual, the last step of Report Designer is the styling. And like it or not, sometimes having something aesthetically pleasing and brand compliant does help sway the hearts and minds, even if the numbers already should be doing that. Like, let's be honest, right? The report alone should be enough to convince people or answer the question. But sometimes having it be pretty brand compliant, easy to look at, it does give you maybe an extra edge over something that doesn't. On the final tab of Report Designer, that's where we can massage our data into something that really, really shines. So you can kind of see it broken down into 4 tabs within the styling page. You can choose general things like the colors being used. Like I just copied and pasted all of ServiceNow's hexadecimal brand colors into there. You can also determine the sizing of the title, the axis label. So like the default axis label sometimes doesn't make sense. So you can kind of change that. You could add a the different orientation, maybe show more specific numbers. Like it's tremendously specific on how you can get on the styling. So definitely fun to play around with if anything. So I highly encourage you, even if it's not part of our big 3 goals for today, to give it a try and play around with it a little bit. And then finally, if you recall, our last question was, how do we get this to the right audience? Sharing is a huge portion of the reporting aspect. And there's a ton of different ways that a report can be shared. The first is, well, how do we actually share it? There are 2 buttons to do so. One, if you're on the styling tab of Report Designer, at the very bottom, you will see a giant purple button that says share. If you're not on that step, like if you're skipping styling altogether, just know that always that box with the arrow pointing out in the upper right-hand corner also is the share button. So both get you to the same department. But then you see there are a couple of different options with regards to sharing. There is the button that just says share. What that does is allow you to select people or groups on ServiceNow to give the access to. So remember before how I said, oh, like here's where you can see all the reports that you have access to. This is you granting that right to somebody or somebody's else. That can be read access, so they can basically just see your report while they're on ServiceNow in the reporting application, or that could be edit access. So you can give them the right to also change around your report as well. The scheduling feature is actually very commonly used for reports that exist as a part of maybe like a weekly meeting. So for example, I created a report back when I was a ServiceNow developer to give us a bunch of data on like our weekly stand-up. And so we would schedule it to run that report and then email us a copy of that report 5-10 minutes before the stand-up meeting happens. So that's a nice way of, if the report exists as some sort of periodic thing, just so that no one forgets to do it. And they might have access already on ServiceNow, but it's a nice double check to say, well, you have no excuse that sent it directly to your email as well. If people are like, oh, I didn't see that report. You go, funny, I emailed it to you this morning. So no real excuses there anymore. Add it to the dashboard. That is one thing I will be spending a little bit more time on in the demo portion. But a much more common way of interacting with ServiceNow reports is not within the reporting application. It is through dashboards. So you can basically create or get access to dashboards where a whole host of reports are all displayed at once. That is the ideal you should probably strive for if reporting is something that is consistently coming up. But it's a bit more of an advanced concept. So just know I do have some resources after today's conversation to teach you more about that if you're interested. And then finally, probably the most analog example of sharing is exporting to a PDF. It just creates you a pretty picture in landscape or portrait of your report. You can print it out. I've like I said, I've worked as a ServiceNow developer before, and some people just don't like computers. Some people just want to see things on print, and so ServiceNow goes, okay, we'll meet you halfway, and it allows you to also print these out in a way that is accommodating for people that don't really want to spend much time on the platform or on the internet or on a computer at all. Now, I'm going to pause here briefly because this brings us to our demo portion. But if there were any questions, I would love to answer them. I do see one from Matthew, so thank you for asking a question. Is the report_user included in the ITIL role? I am 90% sure that it is. It's been a very long time since I've dealt with the ITIL rule. Forgive me. I am like 90% sure. But do not hold it against me if I am wrong. I think it is included in the ITIL role. I see that Diana Smith has raised her hand. If you can post the question in the Q&A, I'm not sure that I can grant the right to auditory questions, but if you could type it in the Q&A window, I'd be more than happy to answer your question as well. I'm gonna take a quick sip of water. Okay. Any other questions? I see. Aha. Well, Well, I'm going to switch around my screen. Oh, perfect. How much practicing this instant matter to getting internships or other opportunities? Ooh, that's a good question. I would say knowing your way around reporting is a very great skill, because if anything, you can very easily prove that you understand the data when you can easily report on what you have done. So, for example, my team personally, we create a lot of content. Like we're creating YouTube videos and we're creating blogs and such. And so we store all that information in a table. And so I just had like my quarterly growth conversation with my boss, and it was extremely easy for me to prove the value I had added because I knew how to run reports very easily on that data. I would say that having this skill, if anything, it allows your work to shine brighter. If anything, because there are objective truths that you can prove about data or about the work that you or your team have done, to just make it a bit easier. Well, I'm going to switch around my share. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop screen. And we're going to do a live demo today. So just to confirm from my own team, I am showing a live version of ServiceNow, correct? Or is it currently sharing the wrong screen?
You are correct.
Awesome. Love to hear that. One quick question. Is it possible to consolidate multiple data sources in ServiceNow, like we can do with Power BI, for example? There is a way to report on multiple tables at once. That is a much more advanced concept. I don't believe it's called data sources. I think it's called something else. But there is an asterisk to that. So tables on ServiceNow can inherit from one another. So for example, many things inherit from the task table. So incident, change, I believe, like there's so many things that all claim task as a parent. If you report on task, any children tables can be included in that report. So that is the easiest way, especially as a beginner, to report on multiple tables at once. They do have to have a direct relationship, but oftentimes the ones that you're wanting to reporting on at the same time do have that relationship. So there is a way to build relationships, basically like SQL query tables together and stitch them together for reporting purposes. It's a much different concept. I would say it goes beyond the bounds of beginner probably to advanced. But the alternative of reporting on the parent table is like a cheaty way around that kind of, hope that helps. All right, so this is my personal developer instance. We're going to build a quick report here today. Fun fact, you too can get your own personal developer instance. What is a personal developer instance? That is a free instance on developer.servicenow.com. So if you're sitting here thinking, oh gosh, I don't even have access to reporting, you can. They are a fantastic resource to using any developer tools on ServiceNow. It basically gives you kind of a blank instance. And so this is mine. I build a lot of stupid fun stuff on here, so I figured this would be a good place to build a report today. So let's follow the instructions I talked about and have some fun while we talk also more about where this can go beyond that. So in my application navigator here on the top, I'm going to go ahead and type in reports. If I spell it correctly, good goodness. And we're going to go ahead and click Create New. That's going to bring us to our report designer and allow us to have some fun. Now, first question, what is our report name? You can see where I was playing around this before. We're going to call this the test incident report. As I stated, we're not going to be dealing with data sources. I will give you a tutorial after this of how to, it's a digital like mini lab of how to utilize data sources, but we're going to be focusing on tables today. And then we're going to go ahead and select our instant table, which also it'll show your recent choices at the top as well, which is kind of nice. So if you're running reports on the same thing, like every single time, it'll at least showcase those at the tippy top, which is nice. So then we're going to go ahead and click next. Now this is going to get, I said, it's going to run a default version of our report. And you can see the default is a list, something that everyone here has seen a million times. Now our report is based off of 67 incidents. I don't care about some of those. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we're also going to filter these. I'm going ahead and I'm going to blow my screen up a little bit so that we can see it better. We're going to go ahead and click the filter button, and we are going to filter these down based off of our field. So these are fields in the incident table and allow us to build our filter. We could filter these based off whom they are assigned to, or even subsequent information based off of that assigned to's information. You can, that's what I was talking about the dot walking before, but we're going to keep it simple. We only care if these incidents were created on, I mentioned it before, but let's do if we were created on last year and see what that does for us. Now, if you're ever wanting to run your report, there is a big purple run button. For some reason, I always default to this guy here, but there are two ways to do this. And now we can see that this data set is much smaller. It was 67 and now it is down to 40. Let's also talk about the visualizations. I covered them before, but here we've got our bars. So you've got bars, histograms, horizontal bars, a couple of options. The pies and donuts, I actually get tremendous use out of. I love to see the breakdown of percentages for data. A lot of things in my job also seem to like that. So those are really good for showing, particularly this one I like for showing like near completion of like how much bandwidth or how much are we close to our goal. That one's pretty nice. Time series charts, these are fantastic for showing how things are growing or changing or improving over time. Multidimensional is getting a little out there. You've got your pivot tables, you've got your bubble charts, much more, a little bit more abstract than the other three. Scores are my love. I love a score chart. Sometimes I just want to know in big red letters, how many tasks do I have due today? 5. All right, I can work with that. Sometimes you just want a simple and clean answer, and scores are very helpful for that. And then here's the weird other ones. These are ones I was talking about earlier where they don't really follow or fall into a specific category, but are very helpful. Our team personally uses the calendar one tremendously. Funnels, you've got list actually pertains to the other one, pivot tables, trends. It gets wild and crazy. So I think let's deal with something that's pretty common. I would like to do a time series chart. So we're going to go ahead and click next into that configure stage of reporting. Now, this is the default. This is not helpful. I don't know whom this would be helpful to, but it's certainly not helpful to me. Currently, remember, we filtered this on when this was created. It was created on last year. Currently, it's grouping by nothing, not very helpful, and it's trending by activity due, just based off alphabetical. So that date does not seem to be a good date to do a time series chart by. Now, thinking of incidents, if I were a boss, I think it'd be very interesting to know how many incidents were being closed on a monthly basis. That seems like a much more interesting question to maybe be answered by this table. So first of all, we need to change our trend by date. There's lots of them. The one thing that I wish ServiceNow did, I don't know how they would, especially for these very large tables, these large defaults like ITSM, CSM, HR, where there's tons of date fields. I wish it could kind of highlight the ones where data typically falls. That would be a lovely little improvement. So maybe add that to your survey and maybe it might be added. Who knows? Just kidding. But let's go ahead and choose the closed date, and then just rerun this and see what happens. Okay, does not look different, but I can see why. We are trending by per year, and I filtered these things to ones only created last year. So here's the empty ones, and then the ones created in 2023. Not that helpful. And we want to know this monthly. So we are trending by the close date per And now you can see how specific this can get. If you wanted to run this on a day-to-day basis, how many incidents were closed per day? You can see that. I don't know how helpful it would be for this circumstance, but you could see that. But instead, let's say per month, and then rerun this again. Okay, a much more interesting report. We can see that they really kicked a lot of butt in June and July, not so much in October and November, but the most glaring problem is that a lot of these do not have a closed by date. Why would that be? Perhaps we need to also change our filter again. If we're reporting on things that were closed in a specific time, we probably want to limit our data set to incidents that are done. This is also probably factoring in incidents that are still active, still live. So this, I think, showcases as well that oftentimes when you're building reports, you also self-correct along the process, or at least I'll be the first one to admit that I do. So not only we want to excuse me. We want to filter our instance a bit better. So not only, I didn't mean to cross it out, but let's add that back in. Our created date is on this year. That can stay. And the active is false. We want these to be just on closed instance. So let's say if that removes any of these 32 empty ones. So it's closed on this year and active is false. So none of these. Okay, interesting. Well, this is some dummy data. I'm playing with it live as I'm kind of going with you on this one, but we'll see how it goes. Clear all for now. And then just rerun. All right, let's stick with that for now. Now, also on top of this, thank you for the correction. You said last year previously. That is where it happened. Well, it's fine for now. We're just kind of playing and having fun. Now, for the group by, let's make this a little bit more of an interesting data set aesthetically, right? Sometimes it's nice to know when things were closed, but if you're talking to a group of teams, maybe you also want to see which team that's pertaining to. So for example, here we can choose not only what's being grouped by, let's maybe group it by category and see how things look there. Whoopsies. Much different looking data. Very, very interesting. Another cool feature of reporting is that all of these, it's not really just creating a pretty picture. All of these are called drillable reports. So if you save this and then end up clicking into a specific data set, it'll bring up the records that are making up that report. That's a feature I really love about ServiceNow reporting. And it allows you to kind of take action on the data. So if you're seeing something in a report, you go, oh man, that's a problem. I need to change it. You don't have to rerun the report somewhere else. You can just kind of click in and see what needs to be done. One question I see, are there limitations on the number of filters and conditions? And what are the number of columns you can bring in? And also, can you create a formula field at the report level, or does that need to be already done at the table or data source? So first question, are there limitations on the number of filters? I don't know. I've never hit a limit, and I've built some really wacky reports that have a calamity, for lack of a better word, of filters. I've never hit a limit. I would assume I guess probably is one, but it would be so chaotically big that you would probably never hit it, I assume. The second question is what about the number of columns you can bring in? The number of columns is limited by the number of columns you can have per table, which I believe is, it's changed a couple of times, but there is a cap for the number of columns per table. That's the cap for reporting. You can have them all. I'm not quite sure how helpful the report would be, frankly, to have every single column, but it would be the number in the table. And then lastly, can you create a formula field at the report level, or does that already need to be in the table and data source? So I don't know. I have not done a lot with formulas in that regard, but I can follow up with you on that, or I can try to find that in the doc site as well. So I apologize for not knowing the answer on that one. I apologize. Another question that we get at times is what is aggregation referring to? Aggregation, it depends on the report as well, but it usually depends on what is being counted or shown. So in this case, it's counting the number of incidents that fall into that category for that time period. Sometimes you want to do an average number. Sometimes you want to sum a specific value together. That wouldn't really be relevant here. But just know that if you're not seeing the report the way you want it to, it might be depending on the aggregation. Account distinct is very helpful for like attendances of things. So if you want to count how many people are like if, for example, if you're running a report on these live on ServiceNow series, if I attended every single one of them and you want to just see a list of attendees, you don't want to see my name like 50 times. So in that case, you would count distinct people and show Lauren, even if I attended all meetings, just like you showed me one. So that would be a good use case for count distinct. Now, styling. One thing I talked about was styling, but I didn't really show much of it other than that one screenshot. So let's kind of dive a little bit into styling. One thing that I find really helpful with styling is just the colors. The default ones are a little not bad, but they're not they don't assimilate usually into most people's corporate brands. So, let's change this. Let's use several colors. And then you can just copy and paste a hex list. Usually companies have some sort of branding guide with your company colors in hexadecimals or your favorite colors in hexadecimals. So just copying and pasting those in, comma delimited with a hashtag, good God, with a with a pound sign will get you those colors in. Displaying data labels can also be very helpful. It will physically put the number on the screen with the category or grouping being represented. So if you really want to emphasize not necessarily the visual, but the number, that can be very, very helpful. You can choose the charting size. If it was showcasing a decimal, the decimal precision. Maybe you would like to change the color and size of the title or its placement specifically on the chart. And then I probably most commonly change the axes. So in this case, incident count, I would most commonly put like, I've already done it, number of incidents. For some reason, I think that rolls off the tongue a bit better. And then just kind of change those things around. So you have a lot of options. One thing I highly encourage is to save often, right? That's one thing that we often forget to do with regards to anything, is just saving often. But now I could go ahead and share this report. I could share this report with anybody. Clicking the share button allows me to, again, set the permissions for this. So if I want to send this to specific people or specific groups, if I want to send this to IT securities, I could do that. I will say the best practice with ServiceNow is to always assign things to a group because people change, people get promoted, people leave their jobs. So assigning it to a group is always, even if that group is just one person, is the best practice technically. Scheduling this out, if you recall, is physically emailing this out at a specific period of time to people. So you can even craft what the email would look like, what time. Do you want it daily, weekly, monthly, periodically, to whom it is going, all that jazz. Exporting it to a PDF, you choose portrait, landscape. You can export it as a pretty picture to print out and hand to the person that's not very computer friendly, and then add to dashboard. This was the note I wanted to leave this presentation on. Reporting, this is, like I said, this is beginning reporting. There's a lot where this can go. One place it can go is dashboards. Forgive the use case. This use case is my Pokemon Sleep current gameplay. Like I said, I build a lot of wacky apps on my personal developer instance. One is tracking my progress in the game Pokemon Sleep, but I do that from a dashboard. All of these are reports that I've made and created to manage, in this case, my game. But imagine if this was for your career or for your job or for a project. Ultimately, creating these types of workspaces is probably the best place for reports to live. It takes a little bit more elbow grease to create ones that have this type of specificity and these types of, like, these turn different colors based off of how close I am to the goals. And this is where the fun of reporting can go. So just know that this is ultimately the place where you could kind of strive for your reports to live. Now I'm going to switch back to my PowerPoint screen to finish off today's presentation. Now, there are some resources I'd really like to encourage you to utilize. The first is please get a PDI. I know that they did a great job of already putting the link to that in the chat. It's free. You could get this is such a phenomenal resource, especially if your company is not using the latest version of ServiceNow. Today, for free, you can get an instance of Washington and play around with every new feature, to most part, that developers can utilize on a PDI. It's a phenomenal resource and oftentimes can sync with Now Learning content, which is the next thing I'm recommending. So today, obviously a pretty brief session, about an hour. There is I think a 3-hour intensive boot camp on reporting on Now Learning. It starts off with pretty much the similar stuff to what we covered today, but goes much, much deeper into things like data sources, into things like building workspaces and all that like. So I highly encourage you to maybe click, if you like today's session, to dive deeper into that in the Now Learning. And then finally, I wanted to link the reporting documentation. The reporting documentation is phenomenal. Reporting has been on ServiceNow as long as the platform has existed. So it's one of the most well-documented features of the platform. Having that available to you is going to be pretty helpful. Now, a skilled team member can help you achieve your business goals faster. I highly encourage you to review also the technical training guides to see how you can use learning credits in Now Learning to kind of grow and upskill your team and accelerate learning with these on-demand courses. There's also live classes, there's hands-on labs. They really help not only boosting adoption on your instance, but also getting a lot of value from your implementation. Tons of great stuff there. Beyond that, there's also expert services guides for ServiceNow's implementation, with some really good leading best practices to accelerate the time value while also reducing risk, right? This is kind of more general now. And also, I highly encourage you, these are all will be linked in this deck, but to check out this solution brief to see how you can also set up your implementation path for long-term success. And with that being said, we have about 10 minutes left for any Q&A that I could help you with. If you have no other questions, again, please fill out the survey. That would mean a lot to me and our team. And if anything, I really appreciate you joining me today. I hope you learned a little bit more about ServiceNow reporting. And I will hang out here for any questions that might exist. But if not, thank you so much. Have a fantastic day. We'll see if any fun questions pop up in the chat. One question I see is, how do I register for the 3-hour session? It's available on Now Learning. So it is a digital lab. You can basically just sign into your ServiceNow account on Now Learning, and the link will take you directly there. And it's self-driven too. It's self-paced, so you don't have to do it like all in one sitting. You can come back to it as well. And thank you for not mocking my Pokemon sleep dashboard. I appreciate that very, very much. When I was like, oh, I've got this great dashboard to show them for this presentation, my heart sank when I realized, I'm like, this is for Pokemon sleep. And also, if you're looking for the link to the recording, that was just pasted in the webinar chat. It will not be available until I'm done with the webinar, but that is the place that it will exist. Any other questions, y'all? Anything I can help with? I can also talk general ServiceNow developer stuff if we've covered all the reporting questions. I'm more than happy to answer anything about developer advocacy as well, or the MVP program, or meetups, or whatever your heart's content. I'm here at the top of the hour, so anything y'all got, I'll do my best to answer. Ooh, I'm getting some questions in the Q&A. Thank y'all so much. Scenario, I need to run reports that sit in numerous different tables. How do I create one singular report that merges all these different tables together? Oh, that's what I was kind of hinting at before. Doing multiple tables at once is a bit more of an advanced concept on ServiceNow. The only way that you could do that as a beginner running reports is if they happen to all have a common parent. If they all have a common parent table that they've extended from, you can report on them all at once. So for example, if they have all extended from the task table, if they've all extended from the CI table, you can report on task or CI and then filter the data just to those children. You could do that all at once. How do I save the Get Started Reports training in Now Learning so that I can find it for later? If you just copy and paste its name, it'll pop up. I think that's the best way you can do it. I believe you can, if you're signed in, I think you can also, you can always just register for it and then come back to it whenever you're ready. What is the best way you've seen to get managers to learn how to use reporting functionality that they have access to instead of trying to have the dev admin team build everything for them? Oh, that's a fun one. How do carrot stick a manager into doing this themselves, essentially? Um, I think the first thing that you can do is prove that they can. I think a lot of people, their resistance to using something like a new digital product is a lot of time people just write themselves off from being able to do it. I think walking them through the ease of it and also proving a lot of times that them doing it themselves will ultimately be faster than waiting for a dev team to build it. That's how I've kind of sold it in the past, even if it was a bit of a white lie, to be honest with you. I worked for a company that there was a lot of people that were a little bit resistant to doing things on a platform versus doing it pen and paper or doing it in Excel. And one thing that really helped was after kind of doing like we did like a lunch session with them similar to this of like how to quickly do so. We then made it very clear that if they were going to ask the developer team or admin team to do it for them, it would be a much more deprioritized ask. There is so much that those teams are working on that need their expertise. This is something that anyone, I am confident, could learn how to do. And so we kind of put it on heavy of like, if you're asking someone to do this, it could take 10 days or something that seems like what to help push them in the right direction occasionally. You could ease them into it and be like, okay, it'll take 3 days, but the more they ask, the more you can scale up that thing and say, hey, like we've had to prioritize other projects that require that team's expertise. If you have any questions about reporting, we'd be more than happy to answer them. But sometimes putting on the fire a little bit in those cases can help. Give them help them have the incentive to build the confidence to learn it. What content block adds links to your dashboard? I created a section on my dashboard with links to other dashboards, but I forget what content block I used. I apologize. I don't know what you mean by that question, Ellen. Um, I I think you might be thinking of like the tabs maybe on my dashboard, perhaps. I'm not quite sure. I apologize. Oop, where's the Q&A? There it is. Your reporting is really helpful. We use it pretty extensively on our team, and it makes, like I said, when for those like quarterly growth conversations or when someone's coming down the pipe saying like, "Hey, we need data on this right now," it makes that answer come very easily. So, knowing your way around a report can save you and your management team a lot of time, which is nice. Also, since we're just sitting here, I will also plug that, I mentioned that we recently are on the heels of Knowledge 24, but for those that didn't get to attend, or if you're looking for another ServiceNow event, possibly in your area, I highly encourage you to look up World Forums. So World Forums are not that far away. World Forums are essentially like micro knowledge conferences, but local. So they are not a week. They are usually a day, maybe two if you're Tokyo. But they are ServiceNow events in local places. There's ones in London, Dallas, Paris, Rotterdam, Tokyo, Melbourne this year. A lot of happy Australians that it wasn't. They're like, everything's in Sydney. I'm very happy it's in Melbourne. So check out the calendar for that one as well. And I just saw a very nice comment that's like, for what it's worth, I'm a manager and I'm very interested in building my own reports. That's awesome. Thank you for that's fantastic. I love that. Love that energy. Will sessions from the ServiceNow London Forum be recorded for those who are unable to attend due to work priorities? I don't know. I know that they did digital recordings for knowledge, and some of that content will be recycled at those events. So it depends. I think it depends on also the size of the World Forum. In the past, London is one of the biggest. So if anything would be recorded, it would be London, I believe. So I don't know the specifics on that, but that has the highest likelihood of being recorded. Yeah, World Forums are great. I'm definitely attending Dallas because that's where I live. But really, fingers crossed, I hope to help others all around the world at World Forums this year. That'd be very cool. We do a similar session to this one, but regards to building apps. So that one's really exciting. It's called the Builder Track, and it teaches the basics of creating custom applications on ServiceNow. So if you're liking reporting and you're dipping your toe into building on the platform, building apps is the next logical step, in my opinion. Everyone can be a developer. That's my thought. So very fun. Also, just while we're here, if you're looking for local events aside from the World Forums, there are also SNUGs, so ServiceNow user groups. Those happen in a variety, like many cities across the world, and they usually meet on a quarterly basis. So keep your eye open for those. And then also developer meetup chapters. So those are, again, usually quarterly, and those are specific towards ServiceNow developers. We help a lot with those chapters, and that's a very fun thing to do. Well, that being said, we're in the final minute of today's presentation. I really appreciate you all being here and asking so many good questions. I really hope that reporting has become an easier thing to dip your toe into. And if anything, if you're wanting to go deeper into reporting, that you have the resources to start that journey as well. Very appreciative of your time here this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are. And I will see you soon. And thank you so much for joining this live on ServiceNow webinar. Have a fantastic